Day two has come and gone, and the clock still has not struck Shedeur. The Colorado product on the board with 102 picks having come and gone. Adding insult to uncertainty, 3 more QBs selected on day 2, bringing the total to 5. On to day 3, Sanders still available. For more, we check in with CBS lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones. JJ, we did not expect to be here, but here we are. Tell me what you're hearing from around the league, how we got here.
This, Joe, is a repudiation by the NFL of how Shedeur Sanders and those around him handled the entire NFL draft process. What you are not going to tell me, or really anyone who watches football, is that Shedeur Sanders is a worse quarterback than Dillon Gabriel, who was selected in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. Look, I didn't think that Shedeur Sanders was going to go in the 1st round of the NFL draft. I thought, and in talking with teams, they told me that he was a 2nd round quarterback. 2nd round comes around. I start calling around today. At the start of the draft, I learned he's probably not going to go in the top 10 of the 2nd round. Okay, that's fine. At some point in there, in talking with NFL evaluators, they believed that at some point in the 2nd round, he would eventually be selected in the 2nd round. Then the 3rd round comes. And as we know, of course, he's not selected at all on Friday night. And so when you look at this, you say that Shedeur Sanders, you see that Shedeur Sanders was clearly talented enough to be selected in the top 5 when it comes to quarterbacks, right? He was a top 5 quarterback in this year's class. Not a great class, not a class that had many 1st rounders, but he was one of the 5 best quarterbacks in this NFL draft. You're not going to convince me otherwise of that. But the difference here is how he and those around him handled the draft process. Let's go back even a year ago when his father, Deion Sanders, one of the greatest athletes of modern times, was saying, look, we might pull an Eli. Which, of course, he was referring to how Eli Manning ultimately didn't go to the San Diego Chargers and then engineered, along with his father, a way to go to the New York Giants 2 decades ago. And then his tune changed over the next year, right? But then what continued to happen? He would tweet after every Las Vegas Raiders loss, "Thank you, God." And it seemed like the Raiders were destined for the #1 overall selection. It seemed like he was trying to engineer his way to the #1 pick on a team that was co-owned by Tom Brady. And then the New York Giants, maybe they get the #1 pick, or they're going to be up top. And so he has the New York Giants colored cleats. And then we get to the combine, and no, he does not throw, which is not uncommon for top quarterbacks these days. But in some of those meetings, and we reported this at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, at some of those meetings with certain teams that maybe Shedeur Sanders didn't really want to go to, didn't see himself going to for any number of reasons. Maybe they had a starting quarterback installed there. I was told that he more or less sandbagged in those interviews. I don't know if he didn't take them seriously, what it was, but he did not give it his all in some of those interviews. Rubbed some teams the wrong way. And so then you continue where it was a pro day that frankly was just sort of average. I'm not saying it was bad. It wasn't great. It was average. And so more and more continues. He gets his number, his jersey number retired. His father retires his jersey number at Colorado. That is something that's really just not seen in major college football, how quickly it was done, and considering the lack of accolades in his career. All of these things began to add up for teams. And I'm not saying that is right that it added up for teams. What I'm saying is it did clearly add up for teams, because you're not going to tell me that the guy who was on the field the last 2 years for Colorado wasn't good enough to be selected by the end of the 2nd night, wasn't good enough to be selected over a Dillon Gabriel, with all due respect to Dillon Gabriel. So this is clearly a way for the NFL and its teams to let him and anyone else after him know you can't comport yourself in this way moving forward.
It certainly feels like, as we head to day 3, penance paid if penance was required here. And maybe there is something to be said about the 3rd day and thanking God, because Vegas is still the one we might have circled, JJ. When might that appetite return for Shedeur Sanders on day 3, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the question, Joe, and I know that you have to ask the question, and you also know, because you've sat here and you've watched this as well, and you, I have to assume, have thought, well, he's going to go at some point, and he hasn't. So I'd love to be able to be the lead NFL insider at CBS Sports and tell you exactly where he's going to go on Saturday. I don't know. I mean, go down the list right here, right? You knew that Tennessee wasn't going to take him at 1. You knew they were going Cam Ward. Okay. Cleveland, they had 5 picks, and they did not take Shedeur Sanders, right? Their quarterback room was Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and an injured Deshaun Watson, who may never play football for the Cleveland Browns again. And with their 5th selection overall in their draft, they took Dylan Gabriel. The Pittsburgh Steelers, right? How much did Mike Tomlin just talk up Shedeur Sanders earlier this week? They've had a couple of picks so far, did not take Shedeur Sanders. Surely they know something about Aaron Rodgers and how he is ultimately going to come to Pittsburgh. The point being, they talked up Shedeur Sanders a lot for someone that they didn't think was worthy of a top 90 pick when they had 2 of them. The New York Giants, of course, passed on him at 3, then traded future capital to trade up to get Jackson Dart, even though they had been scouting Shedeur Sanders for 2 years. The New Orleans Saints, they had 2 picks, and then at number 40 went with Tyler Shough, 25 going on 26-year-old quarterback with uncertainty with Derek Carr. You have the Seattle Seahawks, right, who went out there with 4 picks, and out on their 4th pick, went out and got Jalen Milroe. Probably has a higher ceiling than Shedeur Sanders. Not probably, definitely does. Who knows if we will ever reach that ceiling for him. And so you mentioned the Las Vegas Raiders. They've picked 5 times. They've passed on him every single time. Could he ultimately be selected by the Raiders? Sure. Yeah. I mean, any of these teams at this point, somebody could, because the value you would think would be there. But those are a ton of picks for a quarterback. This is the most important position in professional sports. This is a position where not that long ago, when Brock Purdy was taken in the 7th round, and around that time, we all kept saying, man, you just got to take quarterback every year. You never know. It's so important. How many GMs get fired because they don't get the quarterback position right? So make sure that you are always insulated. All of these teams that very clearly need backup quarterbacks have said time and again, we don't need Shedeur Sanders. And not just need, we don't want Shedeur Sanders. And so we'll see on Saturday where he goes. If it's the 4th, if it's the 5th, at this point, no one should be surprised either where he goes or when he goes, because surprise is out the window.
Opportunity and need have presented themselves multiple times, to your point here, and still no selection of Shedeur Sanders. NFL insider Jonathan Jones, appreciative always of your hard work. Thank you, friend. Here's a look at Shedeur's ranks, which only amplify the statements made there by Jonathan Jones. It's the highest completion percentage in a single season in FBS history. Yet and still, we head to day 3 with Sanders available. Draft coverage continues here on CBS Sports HQ. Shedeur and beyond, we assess all we saw and didn't see on day 2 of the NFL Draft. Day 2 of the NFL Draft in the can. It is, in fact, a quarterback's world, and at the center of some of those worlds, 3 more on day 2. Shough, Milroe, and another, hearing their name called in Gabriel, the name we have not heard. Shedeur Sanders heading to day 3, having yet to be selected. Post-draft is presented by Geico. Switch and save. Get more with Geico. We say hello from our HQ studios. Rand Carthon, Ryan Wilson, Joe Musso, as we explore all that we saw and some of what we did not, starting right there with Shedeur Sanders. We hear names like Ward, Dart, Shough, Milroe, and Gabriel all coming off the board. 5 quarterbacks, and just a couple months ago, what could have been 1-1 is still waiting on day 3. Rand, what does this tell you about the way the league is looking at Shedeur right now?
I'll be frank and I'll be honest. You cannot convince me that Shedeur is the 6th best quarterback in this class.
And I'm not arguing with you.
And no one can convince me of that. I think there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had as to the why. Is it being held? We heard our own Jonathan Jones talk about the NIL era and who his father is, and I don't understand why we're holding that. If that's what's being held against him, why we're holding that against this kid. All right, let's just say he has a maturity issue. Let's just say he does. He has not done anything criminal and done anything that would put an organization in a bad light. So for me, I'm struggling with this right now because it does not make sense to me. And for one thing I want to say, and I went back and I'm looking at previous drafts, and there are quarterbacks that have gone in the first, in the second, in the third, that I do not think are better quarterbacks than Shedeur.
Yeah.
And there have also been players taken that have had criminal past and background issues, and yet they still come off the board and given a chance. I don't understand why this young man has to suffer because of what people perceive him to be.
It's a great point, and it's extremely well said, Ryan. When you look at Shedeur Sanders and the way that you had him graded out into this class, it'd be one thing if we didn't see any more quarterbacks go here on day 2. We saw 3 more names come to pass. And when you look at them relative to the talent of Shedeur Sanders, what comes to mind right now?
No, I think Rand touched on it and said it very well. Our Jonathan Jones also said it well. We heard Damian Harris talk about that during the pregame down in our Fort Lauderdale studios. And to Rand's larger point, and I think it's one worth reiterating, is that we see players every year either drafted or signed as free agents who have off-field issues and legit red flags and things that if you knew what the teams know about these players, you would maybe be picketing outside of the offices of these teams as to why they were bringing these players into the building. And as Rand noted, Shedeur doesn't have a criminal past. He's 23 years old. And when I was 23, and I would imagine when you guys were 23, we were probably doing things that adults might consider immature. And I understand that. And it's not necessarily the team's jobs to hire you. You do have to put your best foot forward. And I have an 18-year-old, and I'm sure that Coach Prime has had the same conversations with his sons. You have freedom of choice, but you don't have freedom of consequence. Things that happen in life also aren't fair. And this is an opportunity to learn and perhaps grow. And you can be angry about it, but I think you have to focus that energy and that anger towards something positive because, like life ain't fair. Things are not going to change just because you are angry at your perception of being treated unfairly. And it does feel unfair from the outside looking in. But hopefully it's an opportunity for perhaps Shedeur to take a look and say, okay, what can I do better? Even if in the moment I don't know if this is necessarily the just desserts that I should have coming my way.
Whatever the cause is one thing, but the effect is that Shedeur Sanders is available on day 3 of the NFL draft in 2025 when the position of quarterback has never been more important in this sport or in sports in general. Someone's going to get a ton of value on day 3 with that talent coming to town. We'll see when that is, we'll see who that is, but this is also a celebration of dreams realized here across day 2 of the NFL draft. We're going to get into some other names, and let's start there at number 40 with the Saints selecting a quarterback in Tyler Shough, one of the names that goes obviously before Shedeur Sanders, the first time since 1971 that New Orleans goes quarterback in the 1st or 2nd round. That is prime capital, Ryan Wilson, to go with a quarterback that might not be ready, and you need someone ready right now. What do you make of that pick?
Not only might he not be ready, he's going to be 26 in the fall. So he's played literally 7 seasons in college football at 3 different stops. And changing schools is no big deal in today's NIL era. But the lack of starts under his belt, the injury history is a huge concern. He looks the part, 6'5", ran in the 4.6s. He has a big arm. He can make plays outside the pocket. But his footwork has a lot to be desired. And his name is Tyler Shough, but as I watched him, I just kept thinking Shuck and Duck. There's a lot of, there's not.
It's ready-made for you?
There's not a solid base consistently, and I get the offensive line struggled at times, and he was the victim of 24 drops. All those things I get, and we don't have to make this all about the guy that wasn't taken, but if you're looking for a ready-made quarterback in a Kellen Moore system that plays indoors, gets the ball out quickly and plays on time, I think your eyes go to Shedeur before they go to Tyler Shough. Now, there are teams in the league that love Tyler for the physical attributes that he brings. And there were very few teams I talked to that weren't high on Tyler Shough, and I get all that. But I think sometimes we can overthink this, and no disrespect to Tyler Shough, but I had him as more likely a day 3 guy than going top 40.
All balls of clay right now need to be molded, need to be taken into a building and put into a system. How do you like the fit of player to system?
I think it fits what Kellen wants to do. And like Ryan said, this guy has physical attributes and physical traits that you can develop and work with. But also like Ryan said, we're talking about a quarterback that's going to be 26 in the fall. And I believe he's a married young man. And so he has that level of maturity, and he can come in, and he's talented. He's talented, but he has the injury history. So he's going to still has to prove that he can stay healthy. And what we saw physically develop at Louisville is what's real and not a one-year knockoff.
let's get off the quarterbacks here. It feels like the Raven-Simone moment where you look into the camera and the thing starts spinning, because that is so Raven, what they were able to do in getting Mike Green.
Well done.
This is a talent that you had graded far higher than this, and we have already alluded to off-the-field issues, the lack thereof for Shedeur Sanders. There were some allegations here for Green that caused him to drop down this board. When you look at what the Ravens got, it feels so quintessentially Raven to get this sort of value at this place in the draft, Ryan.
Yeah, 6'3", 248-ish, 251 is about what he played at. And no player for me played with his hair on fire from snap 1 to snap 60 as an edge rusher than Mike Green. UVA transfer. My comp for him, in terms of the way he played hair on fire-wise, was Will Anderson, who we talked about as being the 3rd overall pick a few years ago for the Texans, and he's certainly panned out. You see the 17 sacks there, had 33 hurries. And they played Ohio State because they always talk about, well, the competition when you're not a Power 4 school. He looked every bit like he belonged against Ohio State. And I think this is, again, you talk about it, Odafe Oweh and David Ojabo both going into the final year of their deals, so they need guys off the edge with this sort of juice.
Rand, rich defensive tradition doesn't even begin to tell the story of the Baltimore Ravens, the identity that they put forth. How does he fit into that identity?
I'm glad you used the word rich, because the one note I took is that the rich get richer. I don't understand how Baltimore falls into these type of picks. It seems like every year, these guys who we covet and who we have ranked high on our big boards somehow always seem to make their way to Baltimore and that organization. And I think this is a prime fit. Like Ryan said, in my opinion, I thought this guy was the most skilled pass rusher, just in terms of being able to work his move and actually get home, which is why he led the country in sacks last year. So this is an awesome fit for that defense, and I'm pretty sure Zach Orr's fired up to have him.
Speed to power. We'll see what he can do in that Ravens system, and you know they have a way of making good great, and we'll see if that is the case for Green. Defense there, offense elsewhere. The Bears wide receiver, not necessarily a place of need, guys, but another piece for Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams in that offense as they go with a player that slid down boards as well. Ryan, I mean, you know where I stand on the case here. What stands out to you about the strategy in Chicago through these 2 days?
Well, they've been a defensive-minded organization for a few years with Matt Eberflus, and that switch has been flipped, and very quickly, by Ben Johnson.
2 centuries.
Yeah, I was going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but fair enough. So Caleb Williams, you take him no matter what your philosophy is, offensive or defensive. And then you come back with Colston Loveland. Rand talked last night about the importance of Ben Johnson and those one running back, 2 tight end sets. So that makes sense. And then you get Luther Burden. You can never have enough weapons for your young quarterback. The offensive line appears to be where they want it to be. We had some conversations about maybe left tackle. Could be a selection there. Ozzie Trapillo, who's they circled back and got in round 2 as well. And then they did get that defensive guy they were looking for. But in terms of the offensive playmakers, this is an absolute A+ with those first 2 picks.
A+, I'm not going to argue with you. Tell me something good here. What's Luther Burden going to bring to Chicago and to Caleb Williams specifically?
He's going to fill that Amon-Ra St. Brown role. And because if you know and understand how Luther Burden plays the game, he was moved around a lot at Missouri and played mostly in the slot this past season. But he was a guy that was at his best when you got the ball in his hands quick and let him do his thing. And so in this offense, in Ben Johnson's mind, he's going to move him around to a bunch of different spots. He'll likely be the slot outside of DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. He'll start his career as the slot, but then they're going to be creative and move him around. And this is a great fit. And now you give Caleb a weapon that can stretch the field. And when Caleb works his magic and he's rolling and he's looking for that big play downfield, we're talking about a guy that ran a 4.41 that can get downfield and take the top off.
When you say Amon-Ra St. Brown, I see a little like gun split back as well. You could put him in there, get him working out of the backfield. It's an interesting piece for Ben Johnson and for that Bears offense. We'll see what it looks like when they get on field. We've got plenty more coming here on CBS Sports HQ, just scratching the surface. And you know we go deeper on with the first pick. These guys right here, day in and day out, and these are big days. Ryan Wilson, tell the people what's coming.
Day 2 recap. Last night, we didn't get home till 2:30 in the morning. That's how serious we are about this. It'll be another late night, but we're excited to talk about all the things that happened through pick 102, Joe.
Game don't sleep. Neither do they. We're just getting started. Straight ahead, our draft experts handing out superlatives. Who hit the mark and where's there work to be done on day 3? Don't move. We're watching draft coverage on CBS Sports HQ.